Hi, I'm Barb.
Hi, I'm Pat.
Pat and I have a lot of interesting conversations.
Yes, and we thought you might like to listen in to our podcast that we've called Coffee House Inspirations.
We hope you will enjoy our topics.
Good morning, Barb.
Good morning, Pat.
How are you today?
I'm a lot better than last week. I'm a lot cooler.
Not metaphorically, but just plain cooler, right?
Oh yeah, it was. I feel back to normal.
Well, I've been talking to people about that, and there are other people that had exactly the same kind of reaction, physical and psychological reaction that you had, where you just felt totally depleted in every way.
Yeah.
And so that was quite a common, I didn't do any real research.
Yeah.
However, some of the people that I talked to said they just walked around in a fog.
Oh yeah, it was almost like you were in survival mode.
Well, I think that's probably what it is, because there is a little danger in that kind of heat if you're not taking care of yourself, because a lot of people died that were overexposed to it, and in particular in BC. So it was a real event.
It really was. And what I learned? I learned that having all of these fans blowing on me constantly is almost like being in a convection oven, because I didn't realize. I know how I felt. I felt really dried out. I felt like every bit of moisture had been like sucked out of my body. But I was told afterwards that having fans blow right on you for that length of time in that heat is really, really bad for you. I just thought it was just giving me some kind of relief. So I learned that that's not the best thing to do. So anyways,
the best thing might be like a self-induced coma or something.
That would be the best.
Anyway, so we're still alive. We made it, and then we had the most intense thunderstorm last night up here in the Northwest. That was just it was both kind of disconcerting and awesome at the same time.
Yeah,
it was beautiful. So
it was wild.
Yeah. So here we are. Look at what survivors we are. We can survive anything. So last week we introduced the book. Gary Zukav's new book, Universal Human. And you and I have been having such fun with this book that we decided to just do a little more exploration with it, because the concepts are not new concepts, but they're very profound, don't you think?
Yes, and he says them in a way that's different, that kind of grabs you a little bit differently. It's almost like it's new, even though it's not new.
Yes, and I think too, it also feels like it's not new, but it's a little deeper level.
Yes,
it's fun to explore that, because I guess there's a time when you're kind of ready to do that, and he's picked a good time. So we kind of fast forwarded a little bit beyond the first 5 chapters that we looked at last week, and now we're going to go right into a couple of chapters. One is called Temptations. The other one is called the Gifts of Temptation. And then we're going to go a little bit into the way he describes non-physical dynamics and the universal law of attraction. So let's start with the temptation section.
Okay.
And he describes at the very beginning of this chapter, he says the choice between love and fear is called temptation. And then last week we defined a little bit of the way he looks at fear and love. So he says the choice between love and fear is called temptation. The way he looked at fear and the kind of description he gave was that it was experiences of jealousy, anger, resentment, superiority or inferiority, the need to please, entitlement, every compulsive behavior, and every addiction and more. And then the way he describes love is gratitude, appreciation, caring, patience, contentment, awe of the universe, and more. Every form of love feels good, he says.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you take us into that first chapter on the temptation?
Okay. Okay. 5 sensory humans misunderstand temptation. They think it is an offering from an external, negative, and evil source. By evil, they mean purely destructive and malevolent. Multisensory humans have a different understanding based upon a different perception of themselves, the world, and the universe. A multisensory individual understands temptation as an opportunity to view the plans of a frightened part of his or her personality before that part implements those plans.
Mhm. So that's really interesting because do you remember Flip Wilson?
Yes.
And his, he was always talking about how the devil made him do things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
And I think that's an extreme and sort of a humorous look at what the 5 sensory person is like. If some temptation rises, they'll say, well, what was I going to do? It was right in front of me. Or, I felt the need to get angry. And so I didn't, because they did that. And I was kind of a victim of that. So I had to yell at them,
Right.
or something like that, so that 5 sensory approach is with what you can see, hear, smell, taste.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
an external, something that's outside of yourself.
Yes. And you are simply reacting to some outside stimulus.
Yes. And calling it temptation.
Yes.
Whereas a multi-sensory individual, like this says, sees it as an opportunity to view those parts, those frightened parts of your personality, to take a look at them,
Yes.
and explore them, and then choose to react differently from a place of love instead of fear, I think is what he's saying there.
Yeah, which is a really another big idea, really, because I think we've been really trained to react to stimulus from the outside as opposed to look at how we're feeling about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've got this idea where people are kind of sometimes out to get us, or they don't care about us, or if I don't protect myself, who is? And if I had to punch back, I'll punch back. And you see so much of this kind of 5 sensory sort of reaction going on in the world. Although there are lots of places where it is not, but we tend to hear about more of the ones that, like road rage, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You get somebody that gets up in the morning and they're just PO'd and they are mad at the world, and somebody cuts them off in traffic, and they take all of that and put it on the person who supposedly made the error.
Yeah.
In their ability to drive or whatever.
Yeah.
And what a different world it would be if that were turned around and the person who was so offended and so enraged by the driver would say, what is going on in me that I'm reacting like this?
Well, that's why I'm wondering, do you think that we should talk about that last chapter, the one that you and I were talking about the other day, before we talk about the temptation? Do you think it will bring everything into a little bit better context?
Well, that might be a good idea. You're talking about the law of attraction and the cause.
Yeah.
Yes, because I think that yes, that might be a very good idea, actually, because it puts that into a little kind of stronger context.
Right, because you explained it really well to me the other day when we were talking about it.
So I guess, one way to look at it is to take that example of the road rage, because there seems to be a lot of that around. And it also seems to couple up with sort of racism, looking at who is this driver and what is their race, and then bringing another level of rage into it, which is also fear-based. So that by the time you get on, that person, he or she, gets on the road, they are looking for some place to lay this very uncomfortable set of feelings.
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
because it seems overwhelming that it could have anything to do with them.
Yeah, it's almost like they're setting an intention before they leave, isn't it?
Yes.
That's what they're going to experience. This is my intention because of my belief and
Yeah.
my beliefs. This
Yeah.
is my intention when I
Yeah.
go out there.
But yes, because it would be something like, well, I'm getting on the road, but this isn't going to be easy
It's
because
not going to
of
be good.
all those idiots out there. So this area that he talks about in the non-physical dynamics, and that's the multisensory human that looks at it like this. He talks about the universal law of cause and effect, and he says the universal law of cause and effect is a message delivery system.
I
So he's
like
kind of,
that.
you have to jump into kind of a metaphoric idea. It's okay, I'm delivering a message somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It delivers messages from you. Your messages always arrive at the right place and time. Even if the recipient moves, they arrive at the right place and time. They arrive at the right place and time, even if the recipient dies. You send a message each time you act with an intention, is just what you were saying.
Yeah.
Since you are always acting, and since each of your actions has an intention, you are always sending messages. All of your messages are addressed. Now, this is the thing that really got to me. All your messages that you're sending are addressed return to sender.
I know. I love that too.
And that kind of blew me away in the sense, in the clarity and the absolute sort of description and truth of how that return to sender letter goes.
Mm-hmm. It says it all, really, doesn't it?
It does so. Said another way, when an action that you take activates an experience in another individual, the universal law, of cause and effect sends you that same experience.
Mm-hmm.
So, and take that back to the driver that leaves his or her home in the morning, has had maybe perhaps an unsuccessful attempt at a new job, or somebody has hurt them, or they feel that maybe their unemployment could be because they blame immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
Or any number of external factors, and take all of that fear that comes from not being able to survive in the world and turn it into rage.
Yes. Yeah.
And that intention to blame and to hurt is already labeled return to sender.
Mm-hmm. Well, because it is the law of cause and effect, or do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's all the same, those little things that you were reading last week. What you're sending out there is going to come back. And I think he even talks about it and refers it to a laser guided boomerang. So whatever you're sending out there is going to whoop.
Yeah, I was talking
loop-de-loop.
to a friend of ours, and she said, oh yeah, it's laser guided, but it's also a heat-seeking missile. so that it can't but find us. So he says, you may have sent your message yesterday, 10 years ago, or 4 centuries ago. If you sent it with love, it will feel wonderful when it arrives.
Mm-hmm.
If you sent it with fear, it will hurt when it arrives. Count on it. The universal law of cause and effect operates flawlessly. Think of each message you send as a personal communication from you to you that arrives via, like you said, a laser guided boomerang.
Yeah, I love the way that he says, think of each message you send as a personal communication from you to you. So don't even think of the other person, of where it's going. Just think of anything that you're sending out, that it's going to come back. So as you're sending it out, think, is this what I want to receive or not?
Yes, exactly. Well, that has put me in a whole new level of sort of awareness of my own thoughts about various things, because I'm guilty of this. I'm not happy with our present provincial government. And so I'm on Twitter and I'm tweeting away these intentions that I'm now looking behind me to see where that
Where the
lays.
boomerang is?
Yes. Because the intention, if I really look at the intention, it is laced with fear. And when I'm trying to determine what that fear is, I think it's an kind of an old fear of maybe not being heard, or not having, having my own needs cared for by somebody in power, which is usually your parents or your grandparents or caregivers of some nature.
Yeah.
And that I think that if I'm really honest with myself, I think it activates that fear response in me. And then I use Twitter to send messages that I think will keep me safe from their governance or something.
Yeah. Well, what would be, if you thought about it okay, so when you're sending out those tweets, what is your intention as you're doing it?
Well, let me think about that for a minute. My intention is to shame, to belittle, and to embarrass, which is close to shame, I guess, and then to get some support for that, because in Twitterville, somebody will always say, yeah, that's right, and you say it again, and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the intention is, if I'm really honest about it, the intention is not very good.
And so is that the same way that you feel when you hear him or see any or read anything that he's put out there? Do you feel those same feelings back from him? So because we're talking about that boomerang thing. Yeah. So if that's what you're feeling putting out out there, if that's your intention, is that what you're feeling coming back?
Yeah, because he's doing the same thing to my sense of values that I do to his.
So that's a perfect example there.
It's a laser beam, and it's a heat guided missile.
Yikes.
So that really is difficult for me, because I've been kind of a I guess a rebel most of my life, and I have to kind of reevaluate a lot of that now, because that there is only one way that can go, right? Like you said, it's laser guided.
Yeah. That would be difficult, because if you've been a rebel, but yeah, I mean, there's also, see, it's tough, because there's being a rebel, and doing it in a way that's has been seen from societies as acceptable, like the protests and stuff like that. So it kind of makes you wonder, well, what are we supposed to do?
Well, I think I think there is a way. Like I'm starting to sort of put this together for some real things that I'm involved in, and that is that when I go into that blaming, shaming, disregard, and use that as sort of thinking that has some actual methodology to it, which it doesn't. It's just not worth it. But I can still stand for things, like I can still stand for universal health care, and I can still stand for fair wages for work done, and I can still stand for for women's rights and for the rights of children, and I don't have to crap on anybody.
Yeah.
And I think that temptation, because we can go back to that temptation always is between that choice of love and fear. And that the universe, if we are loving, and we are doing this in the most humane way that we can, the universe will move forward in a different way than if we are pushing against everything.
Yeah, it's I think it all does come down to the intention before you send it out,
Yes.
doesn't it?
Yes. And I find it a little hard to be honest about those intentions, because it makes, it makes you feel kind of like, oh, Jesus, I've been doing this. And well, that's not very evolved. But, the truth is that where there is fear, there is unresolved kind of issues with yourself,
Right.
or the fear wouldn't show up.
Well, I think that's what he's asking us to do as multisensory beings now, because we are now evolving from the 5 sensory to the multisensory, is when we feel those, when we feel fear, and which, and that's a lot of things. It's anger, it's this, it's many things. What he's doing, he's asking us to now take a look at those, actually feel them, and go inside and kind of, instead of reacting from that old place of fear, now try to do it in a loving way, is what he's asking us to try to do.
Yes.
Is to switch it from fear to love.
Yes. Which is is the challenge of this book, really, isn't it? Like you had a chapter or a paragraph that you liked on the top of at the top of page 81. Do you want to read that?
Yeah. Okay. Every experience of a frightened part of a personality is identical to a temptation in its energy. It originates in fear. For example, the desire to be right, the need to dominate, the need to please, feelings of superiority and entitlement, feelings of inferiority, and more. When you're angry with an individual, your anger is more than a simple matter of thinking of what you dislike about that individual. It is an energy dynamic, and a painful one, that you can experience by placing your attention in your energy processing centers. This is emotional awareness. When you place your awareness in your energy processing centers, you feel physical sensations that are either painful or pleasing. These are more than thoughts.
Mm-hmm. That's brilliant, because that, if I reflect back, on in terms of the Twitter and the way I feel about the government, and I process that through my emotional centers, because it really does get to me on an emotional way. You can ask anybody in my family, they'll go, oh Jesus, she's going to talk about this again. But when I look at it in terms of the context of the way I was parented, the way I was raised, the community I was raised in, that I really see where I had fear of having no voice.
Mm-hmm.
And that if I'm honest about that, I have that fear of having no voice has dogged me through most of my life. And so a lot of the rebellion is based on that fear. And so I will go into that fear again and again when I have a temptation to lash out at somebody, because I actually don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, it gets you a ton of followers on Twitter, but it doesn't do anything for the greater good.
Well, it would get you a lot of followers, because you're getting the energy back that you're sending out. So for sure you would get lots of followers back, because they're supporting your intention.
Yeah. And then I like where he goes on with that at the end. He says, once you realize that every experience of a frightened part of your personality is a temptation, because it is, you just want to get your word in last, you will recognize how essential the dynamic of temptation is to spiritual growth. It is a magnet that draws negative energy from your consciousness and puts it on the screen of your awareness so that you can see it clearly.
That's great, isn't it?
Well, it just says that we don't have to work too hard to wonder what we're up to, because it's on the screen of our awareness.
Right there.
And then you'll hear people, you'll hear like my poor family, like you'll hear people saying, oh, it's not that bad, or why are you so angry about that? And I don't even hear that, because I'm so busy I'm so busy, working through my fear and letting that temptation overtake me, that I can hear it and it's like blah 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 blah.
Well, yeah,
And
because it's
yeah,
your perception based on your beliefs
yeah, and fears.
and fears.
Yeah, and the lashing out, which is why social media is so popular, I
Yeah,
believe, because it's a perfect place for people to, to speak their fears and be self-righteous about it, which is the way we feel when we think we've got the better solution.
yeah.
So it's kind of a real kick in the pants, really. And then the other thing that I like that he says, because we're always looking, we are also looking for, well, I must be on the side of right. Am I not on the side of right? Come on.
Of course I am.
And so, so I get this, and he says, the universe does not punish and it does not reward. The universe supports your spiritual development. Your spiritual development is the purpose of your incarnation into the earth school. As you make choices that align your personality with your soul, you move into health, into consciousness, into life more fully, and into love completely. These are the gifts of temptation. They are for you.
Again, that's great. And yeah, he says, there is no reward for choosing not to act on a temptation, for acting from a loving part of the personality instead also creates consequences. Those consequences are constructive and blissful to experience. It is only a view of experience that includes punishment and reward, that sees from the perspective of punishment and reward. And that perspective is the perspective of fear.
Mm-hmm.
Did that make sense?
Yes, it makes perfect sense, because those are always the choices, and when we're not, I know for myself, if I'm not aware of coming from some fear place, I'll fight for the end of the whatever, because I'm right. And I am right based on my fear.
Yeah.
But what comes back from that is not necessarily a pretty picture.
So awareness, again, and we've talked about this before, is awareness is key, isn't it? That has to be first. You have to be aware of it to be able to, to change it, to take a look at it. You have to at least be aware and acknowledge.
Yeah.
That's what's going on. And I think that's why it's so difficult, and for me included, to think, oh, well, take a look around. If there's anything that you're not liking, in your life, where does that ultimately lie?
Yeah.
It's on me.
Yes.
That's hard. That's hard to accept all the time.
It's hard to accept because we're so used to the opposite, aren't we?
Yeah.
We look around and we say, who am I gonna lay this on? Because this really can't be me. But therein lies all of our freedom when we know it's an inside job.
Yeah.
Because when we don't know that, we give it all over to external forces and said, well, if you could do that, if that person hadn't said that, if they hadn't spoken to me that way, or if they, blah, blah, blah. It's not realizing that you just sent out another return to sender.
Right. So I have a question for you. So if what you're seeing isn't what you like, and you want it to be different, and you desire it to be different, and it isn't, so what is it that I'm not doing or am doing that is stopping it from being any different? Because I'm thinking about it being different. I'm visualizing it being different. I'm doing all of these things that I think is going to help to change the outer by working on the inner, but it still isn't. So what do you think that is?
Well, I hope this doesn't sound corny, but I think about it like a garden. That you do have to weed your garden, and you will always see the weeds. because they, you know, they're self-evident. And in our experiences, we see our fears, we feel our fears, and they're like the weeds in the garden. And as you get the weeds out of the garden and are purposely cleaning it out, and that will be like the fears that come up, or the things that impair us, or the things we think impair us, looking at our own fears, we slowly get rid of those, and the garden grows better. But it's a process. It's a very, I think, a very challenging process, because just looking at some of those fears makes you feel very vulnerable. And you sometimes don't want to say them out loud. But every time something comes up that makes you angry, and there's times when it's okay to be angry, but if you do a careful inventory of that, and you are honest with what might frighten you, you're weeding your garden.
Right.
And you're creating a situation for more to bloom, because you're getting the impediments out of the way.
Okay.
And it's
yeah, because I think that is a challenge for a lot of people, you know, because, what's her name? Esther Hicks, Abraham.
Right.
Like, I think, you know, I've seen lots of videos and talks with her where people have described that, say, well, you know, this isn't what I want. And, you know, I'm trying to do this, and that, but nothing's changing. So there's got to be something that people aren't aware of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it is, as Gary Zukav says, a lot of it is based on unattended fears. And why do we know? We just have to look at our lives and say, is this this is working, this isn't working, what's that all about? To have the courage to go in there and to really be honest with ourselves. We don't even have to have a discussion about it. We just have to be honest with ourselves about what that might be. And that is, I think, a lifelong process.
Yes. And you know what it also reminds me of, Pat, is a lot of the like anonymous groups like AA, NA, overeaters, sex addicts, all of those, I believe that is like a lot of their beliefs and their
yeah, I agree with you.
Their mandate or whatever is to feel the feelings instead of going to your whatever your addiction is, to get rid of the feeling. To medicate the feeling is to actually feel the feeling. And that's what Gary Zukav is saying, is to feel that feeling of uncomfortableness, and then just choose to react to it differently from a place of love instead of fear.
Yes. And understand that it is a choice.
Yeah.
So I think that's sometimes we forget that it's our choice. Yeah.
Which gives us back the power.
Yes. Then see this last sentence of this chapter on universal cause and effect, he says, the universal law of cause and effect does not judge your messages. Like if you send out a really crappy message, the law of the universe doesn't go, I wish you hadn't done that. It just sends it out. It does not read your messages. It does not discuss your messages. It delivers them. Bam.
Whammo.
So I think that's a good place to leave it. I don't know that we'll revisit this on the podcast, but we might. As we study this book and discuss it with each other, something might come up that might interest us.
Can I just tell you this one little line that I highlighted here, which I think is really good. Absolutely. It's just I will see it when I believe it. So instead of saying I'll believe it when I see it, I will see it when I believe it.
Right. Exactly. That's brilliant, isn't it? I love that.
There we go.
I love that. So would I be allowed to read a poem?
Oh yeah.
Because I haven't.
Is it Rumi?
No, it's William Blake.
Okay.
And we've been talking about sending messages and intentions and this sort of thing. And this is from a fragment from Auguries of Innocence from a larger poem. It's called To See a World, and it's by William Blake. To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. A robin redbreast in a cage puts all heaven in a rage. A dove house filled with doves and pigeons shudders hell through all its regions. A dog starved at his master's gate predicts the ruin of the state. A horse misused upon the road calls to heaven for human blood. Each outcry of the haunted hare, a fiber from the brain does tear. He who shall train the horse to war shall never pass the polar bar. Polar bar was some kind of a portal into a spiritual world.
Oh, okay.
The beggar's dog and a widow's cat, feed them, and thou wilt grow fat. A gnat that sings his summer song, poison gets from slander's tongue. The poison of the snake and newt is the sweat of envy's foot. That one I'm a little unclear of, but I think, ooh. A truth that's told with bad intent beats all the lies you can invent. It's right, it should be so. Man was made for joy and woe. And when this we rightly know, through the world we safely go. Every night and every morn, some misery are born. Some are born to sweet delight. Some are born to sweet delight. Some are born to endless night.
Wow. Wow.
I just, this kind of discussion made me think of this poem, and I hadn't read it for a really long time, and it really is about as you sow.
Yes.
And how every intention has an effect. This was, somewhere in around 1810 or something. He wrote this.
Oh,
I don't know
wow.
exactly what time, but anyway, it was kind of fun. So I thought I would just, throw that in.
Well, yeah, because that does the law of cause and effect, the boomerang, return to sender, all of it.
Yeah. Anyway, well, that was fun.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next week.
Okay. Is there? Oh, I guess that covers the. Have you seen or read anything in this last week? Your poem, right? Yeah, because that was beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like to throw a poem in here and there. So.
Yeah,
all right.
Well, you know how I feel about poetry.
I know. That's why I asked you if you didn't mind if I could do that. All right.
Well, thank you.
We'll see you next time, Barb.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Pat. Goodbye.
Bye.